the grill guy who owned the neighborhood. I never imagined a simple Saturday barbecue would turn my quiet suburban life into a showdown that shook our community to its core. My name's Tom Harper, a 52-year-old real estate investor who's spent decades building a portfolio while keeping a low profile. 6 months ago, I moved into a house I own in Crestwood Estates, a pristine neighborhood outside Atlanta. Think manicured lawns, top-rated schools, and a homeowners association, HOA, that runs tighter than a military base. I'm a guy who loves a good ribeye, a cold beer, and minding my own business. But when the HOA president called the cops on me for grilling, he had no idea he was picking a fight with the man who owned half the neighborhood, including his own home. Back in 2013, during the housing crash, I saw an opportunity where others saw ruin. I bought a huge tract of land on the edge of town for a steal when the original developer went bankrupt. When the market rebounded, I partnered with builders to create Crestwood Estates, retaining ownership of 27 homes as rental properties. I set up a management company to handle the day-to-day, so tenants never dealt with me directly. To the folks in Crestwood, I was just Tom, the new guy on Maple Lane, not the landlord behind half the street signs. Crestwood was picture perfect, but the HOA had a reputation. Its president, Gary Mitchell, a 60-something retiree with a penchant for power, patrolled the neighborhood in a golf cart, clipboard in hand, like he was the sheriff of suburbia. My neighbor, Ellen, warned me early on. "Watch out for Gary," she said, shaking her head. "He fined the Wilsons for leaving their Christmas lights up past New Year's." I shrugged it off. I'd dealt with petty tyrants before. As long as I kept my lawn mowed and trash cans hidden, I figured I'd stay off his radar. For months, I did just that. Then, at a neighborhood pool party, Gary sauntered over, his HOA-logoed polo stretched tight across his chest. "You must be the new guy on Maple," he said, sizing me up like I was applying for his approval. "I'm the HOA president." I kept it polite. "Nice place you've got here." He puffed up. "Takes vigilance to keep it that way. Some folks don't get the standards we uphold." I nodded, biting my tongue. No need to stir trouble yet. Trouble found me anyway. It was a sunny June Saturday, perfect for breaking in my new gas grill. I had 2 ribeyes sizzling, the kind of day that makes you glad to be alive. Then I heard the hum of a golf cart. Gary rolled up, clipboard ready. "Excuse me," he barked, "not stepping onto my property." "What do you think you're doing?" I glanced at my grill, confused. "Cooking dinner?" "Are you aware of the HOA rules on outdoor appliances?" he snapped, flipping through his papers. "I read the guidelines," I said calmly. "Gas grills are fine if they're 5 feet from structures and used safely." His eyes narrowed. Per the updated bylaws from our March meeting, grilling is restricted to 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. on weekends to minimize smoke nuisance. News to me. "I didn't get any notice about that change," I said, keeping my cool. "My neighbors aren't home, and there's barely any smoke. I'll finish these steaks and grill later next time." "Rules are rules," he said, scribbling on his clipboard. "First offense is a warning. Second is a $150 fine." He started snapping photos of my grill with his phone. This was getting absurd. "I'll be done in 10 minutes, I said, turning the steaks. "Shut it down now," he demanded, his voice rising. "Immediate compliance is required." I held my ground. "I'm not wasting good food." 10 minutes. His face turned beet red. "This attitude ruins our standards. I'm the HOA president, and when I say stop, you stop." Then, to my disbelief, he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "Police, I need to report a resident creating a fire hazard and refusing to comply." "Yes, he's confrontational." I nearly dropped my spatula. Was this guy seriously calling the cops over a barbecue? He hung up, smirking. "The authorities will handle this." "You called the police because I'm grilling?" I asked, stunned. "I called because you're violating regulations and defying HOA leadership," he corrected, as if that justified his insanity. I shook my head and kept cooking. If the cops were coming, I'd at least have dinner ready. 15 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. I'd finished grilling and was cleaning the grates when 2 officers approached. The older one, Officer Daniels, eyed my grill skeptically. "We got a call about a fire hazard and a confrontation." Gary rushed over. "Yes, I called. This resident violated grilling rules and refused to stop." The younger officer, barely hiding a grin, said, "You called 911 over a grilling violation?" "It's a safety issue," Gary insisted. "And he was confrontational." Daniels turned to me. "Was there a confrontation?" Not from my side, I said. I was grilling. He cited a rule I didn't know, and I said I'd finish cooking before shutting down. Then he called you. The officers exchanged a look. Daniels addressed Gary. 911 is for emergencies. HOA disputes are civil matters. Misusing emergency services can lead to fines. Gary's face went from red to purple. So you're letting him break the rules? That's between you and your HOA, the younger officer said. We don't enforce private agreements. After lecturing Gary on the difference between crimes and HOA gripes, the officers apologized to me and left. Gary stormed off, promising a formal violation notice. That night, over slightly overdone steak, I stewed. Calling the cops over a grill wasn't just petty, it was dangerous. What if they'd been needed for a real emergency? And if Gary was this unhinged over a barbecue, what else was he doing to harass residents? The next day, an HOA email arrived with a violation notice and the updated bylaws. The grilling rule was real, but the document had been uploaded just 3 days earlier, hardly enough time for anyone to know it. I started asking neighbors about Gary. Stories poured in. Fines for a moving truck parked too long, a bird feeder 6 inches too tall, Christmas lights up 1 day late. Gary was on a power trip, and the HOA was his playground. I called my property management company and requested 3 years' worth of HOA records, correspondence, voting logs, and meeting minutes. The data painted a grim picture. Under Gary's reign, fines had spiked 200%. Meeting attendance had plummeted, leaving decisions to Gary and his cronies on the board. Worst of all, Gary had violations on his property: an oversized shed and unapproved landscaping never reported. The hypocrisy was galling. The annual HOA meeting was a week away, the perfect stage to act. I spent days preparing, studying the HOA charter, state laws, and my ownership records. I compiled evidence of Gary's selective enforcement and drafted a plan to shake things up. The meeting was held in the community center, barely half full, a sign of how many residents had given up on the HOA. Gary ran the show with his usual arrogance, rushing through agenda items. When the floor opened for comments, I stood. Gary tried to brush me off. If you have concerns, submit them in writing. Actually, I said, per section 4.3 of the bylaws, this meeting allows resident comments on governance. I've read the rules thoroughly. He scowled but couldn't argue. Be brief. I'll cut to the chase, I said, addressing the room. Many of us have faced inconsistent rule enforcement, poor communication on bylaw changes, and selective targeting. Last weekend, I was cited for grilling at 3 p.m. because of a rule finalized days earlier. When I tried to finish cooking, our president called the police. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ellen whispered, "The police?" The officers had to explain that HOA disputes aren't criminal, I continued. This overreach isn't just about me. Fines have risen 200% in 3 years. Residents are harassed over trivialities while leadership ignores its violations. Gary banged his gavel. This is out of order. We're moving to board elections. Perfect, I said. I'm nominating myself for the board. His jaw dropped. You've been here 6 months. You don't know how this community works. I know it better than you think, I said, pausing for effect. I don't just own my house. I own 27 properties in Crestwood. The room went silent. Each property gets 1 vote. With 27 votes, I can sway this election. And for the record, Gary, you're my tenant. You rent your house from my company. Laughter erupted. Gary's face turned ghostly white. That's impossible. I have proof, I said, holding up a folder. County records confirming ownership. I'm happy to share. Turning to the crowd, I added, I'm not here to micromanage your lives. HOA should maintain standards, not terrorize residents. Calling the cops over a grill isn't leadership, it's bullying. A woman named Carla raised her hand. If you own all these properties, why speak up now? Fair question, I said. I let my management company handle HOA matters. I moved here for a quiet life, but after seeing how Gary operates, I had to act for my tenants and this community. The meeting descended into chaos. Some residents cheered, others whispered about my motives. Gary tried to regain control, but his credibility was shot. When voting began, I used my 27 votes strategically, backing respected residents like Ellen for board seats and taking the bylaws committee chair for myself. Gary barely got a handful of votes, losing his presidency in a landslide. Afterward, he cornered me in the parking lot, furious. You set me up? You could have told me who you were. Would it have mattered? I asked. Would you have treated anyone differently if you knew I owned your house? He had no answer. What happens now? He muttered, clearly worried about his lease. The board will review fines for fairness, I said. We'll ensure residents know about rule changes before they're enforced. Your lease stays as is. Don't evict over disagreements. But I hope you learn what it's like to be on the receiving end of unfair authority. In the weeks that followed, Crestwood transformed. The new board scrapped ridiculous rules, like the grilling hours. We required resident input on bylaw changes and focused fines on real issues, like safety hazards. The neighborhood felt like a community again, not a police state. Gary kept a low profile, and when his lease ended 3 months later, he moved out quietly. A year after the grilling fiasco, I hosted a neighborhood barbecue in the community park. At 2 p.m., I stood at the grill, flipping burgers for neighbors who now felt free to enjoy their homes. An elderly resident, Mr. Thompson, approached me. For the first time in years, I don't worry about my trash cans being out early, he said. This feels like a real community again. That moment made it all worth it. I didn't set out to be a hero or flex my ownership, but sometimes you have to stand up to bullies hiding behind rulebooks. Crestwood's HOA still exists, enforcing reasonable standards, but it serves the people now, not one man's ego. And I grill my steaks whenever I please. What do you think about this story? Have you ever faced a bully like Gary, whether in an HOA, workplace, or elsewhere? Share your thoughts in the comments, especially on how we should handle power abuse and injustice in our lives. Take a stand and let us know where you stand.